Hello friends, in today's lecture we will discuss about the electrical activity of the heart. So let's begin with the description of the heart. Heart is a muscular organ that acts like a pump to send blood throughout our body all the time. It consists of four chambers, two upper chambers and two lower chambers. Two upper chambers constitutes right atrium and the left atrium. Right atrium, it receives deoxygenated blood from the body through the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava. Left atrium receives oxygenated blood from the lungs through the pulmonary veins. Two lower chambers includes the right ventricle and the left ventricle. Right ventricle receives deoxygenated blood as the right atrium contracts. Left ventricle receives oxygenated blood as the left atrium contracts. The left atrium and the left ventricle are separated from the right atrium and right ventricle by a wall of muscle called the septum. Now let's discuss about the valves of the heart. Valves are located within the chambers of the heart. They control the direction of blood flow. The heart consists of four valves: the tricuspid valve, the mitral valve, the pulmonary valve, and the aortic valve. The tricuspid valve is an atrioventricular valve situated between the atrium and the ventricle. It controls the opening between the right atrium and the right ventricle. The mitral valve is also an atrioventricular valve situated between the atrium and the ventricle. It controls the blood flow between the left atrium and the left ventricle. Next, the pulmonary valve is a semilunar valve situated between the right ventricle and the pulmonary artery. It controls the blood leaving the heart. It also prevents the blood flow back to the right ventricle as it relaxes. Next is the aortic valve. It is also a semilunar valve which controls the blood leaving the heart. It controls the blood flow between the left atrium and the aorta. It also prevents the blood flow back to the left ventricle as it relaxes. Next, we will discuss about the heart's electrical system. The heart's pumping action is regulated by an electrical conduction system that coordinates perfect blood circulation in the body. Let's discuss what are the main parts that comprise of the heart's electrical system. In this, first is the sinoatrial, that is SA or sinus node. The electrical signal begins at the SA node, that is also known as the heart's pacemaker. It is a small mass of specialized tissue located at the top of the right atrium. It generates an electric stimulus regularly around 60 to 100 times per minute under normal conditions. This electrical impulse causes the atria to contract, pushing blood into the ventricles. Next is the atrioventricular, that is AV node. The electrical impulse travels to an area of cells at the bottom of the right atrium called the AV node. It also acts as a gate to slow down the signal so that the atria and ventricles do not contract at the same time. The two upper chambers, that are atria, are stimulated first and contract for a short period of time before the two lower chambers, that are ventricles, contract. Next is the His-Purkinje system. It carries the electrical signals from AV node throughout the ventricles to make them contract. It includes his bundle, that is the start of his Purkinje system, right bundle branch, left bundle branch, and then the Purkinje fiber. His bundle divides into left and right pathways called bundle branches to stimulate the left and right ventricles. At the base of the heart, these bundles further divide into Purkinje fibers. They pass the signals to the heart muscle, causing the ventricles to contract. Each contraction of the ventricles represents one heartbeat. Now further we will move towards electrocardiography, that is commonly known as ECG. Electrocardiography is the word derived from three Greek letter words electro, cardio and graph. Electro means electricity, cardio is for heart and graph means to write. An ECG is the recording of the electrical activity generated by the cells of the heart that reaches the body surface. We have some terms we should know to discuss about ECG. The first is automaticity, that is ability to initiate an impulse. Next is excitability, that is ability to respond to a stimulus. Then is conductivity, that is ability to transmit an impulse. Next is contractility, that is ability to respond with pumping action. Now let's have a look on the dimensions of an ECG paper. It represents, if you see, on x-axis the time, that is mainly in milliseconds. On y-axis it is amplitude, that is mainly in millivolts. Now one large box that is mainly of 5 mm cross 5 mm dimensions represents 200 millisecond time and around zero point 0.5 millivolt amplitude. If you talk about the small box, it is of 1 mm cross 1 mm dimension and it represents 40 millisecond time and zero point 0.1 millivolt amplitude. Now this is a representation of electrical events of a single cardiac cycle on an ECG paper. We will discuss each part in detail in the coming slides. Starting with the isoelectrical line. This represents the resting potential of the heart. The electrical events will be represented by deflection away from this line. Cardiac cycles are initiated by the depolarization of SA node. The cell is usually negatively charged. At some point, it will become positively charged. This is known as depolarization. It is the point where the muscle can squeeze down. Some cells depolarize by themselves. These cells are mainly present at SA node. This property of getting depolarized by themselves is automaticity. Now all the neighboring cells are going to depolarize. The wave of electrical depolarization is conducted through the cardiac muscle of both the atria. This is called atrial depolarization and it represents P wave. The depolarizing wave causes contraction of the atria, pushing blood into the ventricles. Next is the atrial ventricular node depolarization that represents PR interval. The wave of depolarization from SA node reaches the atrioventricular node through the internodal pathways. AV node then depolarizes and conducts. It also creates a delay between the atria and the ventricles. Both atria and ventricles contract the same number of times but not at the same moment of time. There is a slight delay, approximately of 0.1 second. If atria and ventricles contract simultaneously, then they be passing the blood against each other. This will not move the blood in the right direction. So by creating the delay, atria can contract first, passing the blood to the ventricles. After zero point 0.1 millisecond, the ventricles can contract and move the blood onwards. Now next is the movement of depolarization from AV node to the bundle of His, that is also known as QRS complex. It moves quickly through the specialized conducting tissue. At this point, the electrical signal can spread in all directions through Purkinje fibers. The coordinated, synchronized depolarization produces an effective contraction of both ventricles. Last is the representation of T wave, that is depolarization. After depolarization and the contraction, the ventricle repolarized, returning to the resting potential. Now this was the representation of electrical events for a single cardiac cycle, that is step-by-step representation. Now let's have a look at a combined procedure. Starting from the depolarization of SA node, leading to the depolarization of AV node, which further depolarizes and conducts. Then reaching to Purkinje fibers, the electrical signals spread in all the directions, leading to the effective contraction of ventricles, and then ventricles repolarize, returning to the resting potential, and the process continues. Thank you so much.